University management says they have tried their best to assist with the continuous accommodation crisis, but their hands are tied and the budget is tight.
We speak to the off-campus providers, and we've put arrangements in place for particularly NSFAS students, funded students, and which is the poor. We've made sure that all barriers to potential access is removed. One of the things, for example, that might be a barrier to a NSFAS student is a deposit that's required. We've, in our processes, been quite clear that with providers, no deposits for those groups of students should be charged, and they haven't.
The Student Representative Council admits that the university has tried to assist the homeless students, but they believe more action is needed on the ever-growing student housing crisis.
Prof. Andrew Crouch has agreed to ensuring that more beds will be made available. He says that he has been communicating with the likes of South Point. They are willing to give us about 50 beds. Campus Lodge as well is also available with an additional 90 beds. Listen, the task is a mammoth one. We believe that even though some strides have been made, that the institution management more specifically will live up to its promise of housing those students. And even so, it is still not enough. We need people from the private sector, from the public sector to come on board in order to assist us to house these students.
Fellow students joined the protest, demonstrating in solidarity with those who face the daily struggle of homelessness.
I'm here today in support of those students who are without accommodation, without allowances, without book allowances, without any food to eat. Mainly because, one, I'm a student leader, and secondly, I'm just a concerned student who has a conscience. What matters to me is that everybody's given equal opportunities, because the fact of the matter is these students who are sleeping in labs and going hungry are the same students who are expected to perform at the same level that people like me who have accommodation and funding have to perform at.
The SRC says the university has found accommodation for 200 homeless students. Meanwhile, the housing crisis continues each year, and a long-term solution is needed to ensure that this distressing situation is not constantly repeated. For Newsroom Africa, Channel 405, I'm Sipa Kema in Johannesburg.
Right. Good evening once again, and our frank talk tonight is with the VC of Wits University to talk about the overall situation of universities in our country. Prof, good evening and welcome, and congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you very much.
I must talk to you to see whether I can come and do my postdoc there or something. You all right?
Thank you very much. I'm well, thank you very much.
No, wonderful. Hey, Prof, you know, my worry is it looks almost like a ritual, an annual ritual. I mean, you know, I understood when we had TEFLOP in 1989, you know, when this happened. You know, I remember that in 1989 and 90, we got the university to build prefabs. I don't know if you can believe this. Prefabricated accommodation. And we said, once we see the trucks moving, we'll go back to class. Do you know that those it's 30 years ago, those prefabs are still there. They're still housing students. So the temporary solution became a permanent solution. Because, I mean, how do you explain a 30 years temporary accommodation? So please explain to me in the way you understand it, not just from a Wits perspective, from overall. Is there a problem in actually catering for numbers, right, that we already know by November? These are the numbers that we're going to have for first-year students who are going to need accommodation. Just to start with accommodation as the first crisis. Okay.
So I think that there's four. By the way, I want to start somewhere else before I come to that.
Yeah.
You used the example of the late 1980s.
Yes.
I was a student activist. You were there.
Yeah.
We never burnt buildings.
No.
We built.
No.
But we never burnt.
We didn't burn. No.
The thing that frightens me.
Not the libraries, not the admin block.
That's what frightens me about what this generation is doing. They're burning. They're not building. So we've had burning in UKZN. We had a burning in Zululand. We had a burning in CPUT. That's what worries me. In the 80s, we never burnt. This is a new phenomenon. It's a destructive phenomenon. It's a treasonous phenomenon. And I think we need to address it.
Absolutely. I can never justify or even understand. How do you ban a library?
And ask yourself why are student leaders quiet about it? Why they won't condemn it?
Are they quiet, really? I had a couple of them here, some 3 SRs, including President from Wits, who actually all condemned the bedding.
Yes, they condemn it and then ask them to identify the people who are doing it, and they won't. I asked them, on multiple occasions I've sat here with student leaders and said, tell me who's doing it. I know you know.
Yeah.
And they won't do it. Why? Why is that legitimate? In which struggle is that legitimate? But let me forget that for now. Let me come to your issue.
Yeah.
There are 4 substantive challenges that are associated with all of the struggles. The one is historical debt.
Okay.
People can't register because they owe
the money from
money from years before. Yes. The 2 is the problem of the missing middle. These are people who are too rich for NSFAS, but too poor to pay. That means they're above the 350,000, and they don't have money for universities. The 3rd is accommodation. Now, in rural areas of the country, accommodation is a supply. So you go to Toyando, there's just not any buildings there. But in a place like Braamfontein, in Johannesburg, or even UKZN, or even Cape Town, or even Port Elizabeth, there's enough supply of beds, but it's owned by the private sector. So if you look at Wits, we think that there's a demand for about 15,000. We have 6,500 beds as Wits, and we have another 11,000 accredited accommodation in the private sector. So we've got more demand, more supply than required. What our problem is the students who need to effectively access those accommodation can't afford them or don't have the resources for them. Now the question you'll ask is, why don't they have the resources for them? There's 2 roles. Either they're in the missing middle, which means they haven't got a scholarship, or in the Wits case, which those student leaders are silent about, is the 200 that are struggling, most of them are people who've lost NSFAS. Now if they've lost NSFAS,
because of academic reasons,
they must have failed more than once. That means they failed twice or more. Now the question that emerges is, how often do you carry on paying, using public money to pay for somebody who repeatedly fails? NSFAS says 1 time. Is it 2? Is it 3? Are there any limits? Saus and the student leaders reject N+1. So what are you saying? We must use money to repeatedly pay for somebody?
Let's pack it there. So you are saying that there are different categories of people who may seem left out, but in fact they know that in fact they have reached the end of the line. I'll come back to that after the break. We're talking to Adam Habib, a professor, VC at Wits University, who's trying to make me understand what the crisis is about and how we can take it forward. He's condemning viciously the burning of buildings, and I want to join him in that. I just don't understand it, and it's something that's happening not just at universities. He was burning a train. They burn a train, and then tomorrow they say, oh, there's no train. But they burned it yesterday. They burned a library. They burned a clinic, like we saw in Mamelodi. Anyway, we'll talk about that straight after the break. Stay tuned. All right, we are on a frank talk tonight with VC Adam Habib, and trying to understand the state of things. Of course, you can join the conversation. Call us if you want to participate in this chat on 010-594-5140. Give us a ring. We'll take your call through our. Of course, you can tweet us at JJ Tabane at Newsroom 405. Prof, you've raised a very important issue. There's always been these 2 categories of exclusions: financial exclusions, academic exclusions. Right? Let's start with these academic exclusions. Right? Is there a way of what I don't know what to call it, but something like an academic rehabilitation? In other words, you register, like I registered BSc, which was completely ill-advised, right, and failed everything. Okay, literally. I mean, I only passed something called special English for science students, but the rest I failed: chemistry, math.
So JJ, let me start by this.
Right. So I just want you to deal with this thing of rehabilitation.
I will. Let me start.
Then the person can change course and go and do BA in English.
So let's start off with this and say, I failed my first year.
Yeah.
So I'm very cognizant that young people make mistakes.
Yes.
And so they must be given another chance.
Yes.
And so we committed to that.
Yeah.
But the question is, how many first chances another chance do you get?
Yeah.
I failed my first year. I realized what I did was wrong. I went back to the institution and I passed. And I completed my degree largely in N+1.
Yeah.
What we have is a rule. In NISFAS, they say, we'll give you one chance to fail.
Yeah.
That's generous, but they're giving one chance to fail. N+1. What we give as Wits is N+2.
So you have 2 chances.
You have 2 chances, but the problem is, when people come in the second chance, after they fail twice, they have no more money because they've lost the NISFAS fee. So now they say, I must pay as Wits for them because they've lost the NISFAS money. Now tell me, is this fair? I'm not paying for students who are passing. You know, missing middle students, they're passing and I don't have the money to pay them. But I must pay for somebody
who's failed
twice.
Twice.
How is that legitimate in a society?
But just there, it means that actually, in actual fact, they're not being given a third chance.
Well, that's the point.
Because they don't have the money.
Well, what they're demanding is that we find the money. Now, actually, we allow you to register. We allow you to come in. But now they're saying, no, we lost our money, so now we want you to pay for accommodation.
And that is not on.
How do I... Tell me logically, I must say to a young poor student who's passing, I can't give you money.
I have to give this one.
I have to give this one who's failing.
Who's a third
now,
time
why
failed?
are those student leaders who are talking about this silent about it? You see, that's the problem about this. People don't give the full facts. Now, when the SRC came to us at Wits, they said there were 1,100 students. We found 17 million rand. They don't say that. Which we moved from the academic program to help those students. We helped 900 who are effectively students that are passing or have passed, some of them. These ones have failed more than twice, which means they've lost NISFAS. Why? Aren't we honest? Where is the accountability of the student? When you working, you know it's public money. Why aren't you dedicating yourself to your study? You know, we've tracked failure rates. And then we've tracked attendance rates. And we find there's a huge correlation between people who don't attend class
and those who fail.
And those who fail.
So they're loitering, essentially.
So there's a question that we have to start asking.
But you have an appeal system where someone who
we do have an appeal.
has failed even twice can come and make a case.
So we do have an appeal system. So let's say, I'll give you the example. Where somebody has appealed twice, N+2, and they still failed, we give a chance if you're in your final year. Because if you've gone right to the end, we say at least give them a chance.
You are right
but
there.
Remember this, for every student that doesn't leave, another person can't come in. So you're hogging that place.
So it's access. It's an issue of access.
Remember, we have 77,000 places, applications for 5,000 places.
This is first year.
First year. There's 72,000 people trying to get in, and somebody is hogging it, failing repeatedly. That's not fair. And then they say, if you don't allow me, I'll burn the place down. Which society in the world tolerates this kind of nonsense?
But why is it that it's an annual ritual? Why is it that in November, when the students finish exams, between November and February, you don't get to sit around the table with students to crack the numbers,
Chief, be fair. Every one of those students know that we've engaged them multiple times. Our dean of student has engaged them multiple times. They even signed an agreement in which they protested on Wednesday. They didn't disrupt, they got 1 to 2 classes, but other than that, it wasn't a major. But they signed an agreement. The agreement says, we will not engage in ways to disrupt the academic program. They broke the rule within 10 days. You know as well as I do that actually the paper a student leader signs at this moment is not worth toilet paper.
Paper is written on,
It's not worth the paper. They break the rules all the time. And part of the reason they can do that is because they're not held accountable. I tell you this, you can talk about violence as much as you want. You can talk about your complaints about clinics burning. You can talk about gender-based violence. If we do not have consequences for people who are violent, we will never resolve it. Like if we'll never stop corruption, if we don't lock people up with corruption, like that, we will never stop the violence in universities if we don't lock them up.
But
and that's the
do
problem.
you find it extraordinary that given the case of Takeshi, right, where in fact he ended up in prison, burning down a police car, etc., right, first of all, he came out, because of whatever the president...
They changed the rules. Let's be honest. What the president and what the Minister of Justice did, they needed him out. It was a political issue. They changed the rules so that they can declare amnesty for certain categories so these guys could make the criteria and come out.
All right.
That's what happened.
Everybody can see that part. But I'm saying, don't you find it extraordinary that even post that, where it was really touch and go, the guy could have spent, most of his, young adult life in prison, that you still have a continuation of the burning of buildings, libraries, etc. that we have seen over the last 3 weeks.
There's no consequence for it. Here's ask myself the question. The student leaders that launched the campaigns in UKZN, in Zululand, all belong to parties. Some of them belong to the ANC. Has any of them been expelled for doing this? Not a single party has expelled the student leaders that have actually participated in demonstrations that have destroyed the infrastructure. That's the problem. There's no accountability. But here's the other problem. You raised the question, what are the challenges in all of these, whether you're talking of accommodation, historical debt, missing middle? The question is the issue of finance. If you can fix the finance question, you will fix all of the other problems.
We all thought it's sorted when they said there's now free education.
Right. So here's the thing. That's the issue that we had confronted. When Fees Must Fall happened in 2015 and 2016, this thing exploded. The President Zuma established a commission, the Hare Commission. The Hare Commission developed one model. What it basically said is for you to pay for free education will cost you 140 billion more than the 80 billion you're spending. So it'll cost you 220 solely for fees. If you add accommodation and subsistence, add another two, you're looking at about 400 billion. It said you don't have the money. What we recommend is a loan scheme. What you can do is take the existing resources, you work with the banks, you use it as collateral, they'll raise the entire 200-300 billion, and basically they will lend the money to anybody who needs it in the system, and basically people will pay it when they get a job and they earn at a certain income. That was model number one.
It can then be used, recycled.
The downside of that is you'd have debt. That was the downside. The upside is it covered everybody. Jacob Zuma didn't go for that. He went for model number two. Model number two was effectively told to him by his daughter's boyfriend, who was studying effectively a PhD. It sounds mad, but that was basically it. And what he convinced him of was to choose everybody with a family income of less than 350,000. But don't give them a loan, give them a grant, which is the whole thing, which is accommodation, tuition and subsistence, equivalent to about 150,000 apiece. That cost shifted the budget of NSFAS from 12 billion to 40 billion. But the downside is it covered only between 45 and 50%. So it left out and created the problem of the missing middle. Those were the two models. Now, the student leaders and Jacob Zuma, the student leaders were opposed to the one. They wanted everything. But effectively, Jacob Zuma went for the model for the grant for the 300. You know why he did that? He tried to skew the elections in December 17. He declared it and he said, I'm giving free for those below this thing. They thought it will cover 90%. It only covers 50% of the problem. So when
still
Cyril
having
wins,
a crisis of funding there.
When Cyril finishes, when he wins the thing, he can't reverse because of the politics of the ANC. He can't reverse this decision of Jacob Zuma. So they decided to stick with this. And what it did was only cover 45 to 50%, and it left the missing middle. Now, you had two choices.
Yeah.
Would you rather, I would have argued, if I was the person,
Yeah.
I would have rather said, let's take this problem out, do everybody, yes, they will have a loan,
Yeah.
but it will buy us 5 to 6 years of stability. With that stability, we'll get economic growth. With economic growth, we'll get money.
Yeah.
Then we can start freeing parts out.
But why can't you still give this missing middle loans
Because,
at the moment?
Because you would need to underwrite that.
Yeah.
So what you did, the way when I spoke to the bank CEOs, they said if you want to finance that, you put normally between 10 and 15% as collateral.
Yeah.
So if you're going to ask for a 200,000 loan system, you would need to put about 15 billion, which is what NSFAS used to be.
Yeah.
And is probably double what NSFAS is double that. You could then pay for the whole thing. Now you've used all of that money for the grant. You don't have the cash to underwrite the collateral for the loan scheme that plays up. That's the problem.
It sounds like a big mess, Prof. I don't know how we're going to sort it out. After the break, I want us to then say, okay, fine, this is what has happened. We all understand what Jacob Zuma tried to do, etc. The last kicks of a dying horse in that regard, leaving us with a mess. How do we unscramble this egg at the moment? We're talking to Professor Adam Habib. After the break, Lindy Serame, tell us what's happening on social media there, and then the Prof, now we drill down into the solutions. Stay tuned. Good evening once again, and our Frank Talk continues with Professor Habib. But let's go to social media now. Lindy Serame, what's happening on social media there?
All right, JJ, well, the Wits Vice-Chancellor, he took to Twitter a few weeks back or a few days ago just to respond to some of the questions that had been posed to him about, you know, the crisis at institutions of higher learning. And this was in a 14-point spread where he wrote down some of the points that he thought were relevant. And he really said the core issue here is the financial issue. So the financing at institutions of higher learning causing some of the issues that he pointed out. So let's take a look at some of the reactions to his tweets. Clive saying the crisis is purely an ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa problem. They don't want to make the hard decisions. When a student was arrested and sentenced for burning a police vehicle, Cyril Ramaphosa and Ronald Lamola gave him parole. No wonder higher education is in a crisis. That's something you and the Vice-Chancellor touched on a little earlier on. Mpendulo saying, my thing is nowhere do you mention that the university needs to take responsibility. In what way? You're spin doctoring the truth, telling lies and claiming easy victories. Here's another tweet that says, so the poor behavior of students that do not actually have the aptitude and attitude needed for the learning is acceptable. 80% of students at varsity lack the intellectual capacity to be there. They're just freeloaders, free food, free accommodation and free effort. Tapelo saying, also it amazes me that students are unable to grasp the complexity of South Africa's multifaceted problems that render it impossible to meet their demand but require compromise and patience. Their goal is a great ideal which South Africa can work towards but definitely can't meet right now. All right, well, JJ, we also had my colleagues Liesel Wilson and Jacob Mushukwa speaking to our political analyst, Mighty Jamie. He also studied at Wits University. Here's what he had to say when he was asked about the type of legacy that the Vice-Chancellor leaves behind.
There was a principle that united all students and continues to unite all students. That principle is that education should be accessible to all. In order to create an equitable society, you need to have certain barriers of entry removed. That's number one. Number two, Adam Habib fails to be a reflective leader because he wasn't a bystander when these things were happening. He came to Wits in 2013, right? Accommodation has been a challenge at Wits. When you read the prospectus, it says to you, we can only accommodate 25% of the student population. That's in the prospectus. So they tell you to make your own plan. But as a leader who comes into an entity, you have to leave things better than how you found them. That's the mandate of leadership. You love your community, leave things better than how you found them. So what does that mean in respect to accommodation? Adam Habib focused on luxury accommodation at Wits University. There were 2 luxury accommodations built at the same time that Wits was increasing losing its student capacity at the same time that Wits was cognizant that there is a shortage of housing. So they built these luxury accommodations, left a space that was then taken over by private capital. But when private capital comes to provide students with accommodation, it's not doing so in a humane or humanitarian way. That's why you've seen the monopolization of student accommodation, not only in Braamfontein, not only in Auckland Park, but across the whole country. Adam Habib has failed in every interview, in every article, even in his book where he tried to valorize himself when he was actually a problem in the system. He has failed to be self-reflective on where did I come short. Any leader who fails to show you where did I go wrong in the last 7 years when I was critically involved in all of this, that leader is problematic. Lastly, he sounds very salty to me when he takes issue with the fact that some student leaders who came out of Fees Must Fall were able to become members of parliament.
1.2 million rand a month in parliament.
And he earns 4 million and he did nothing at Wits. Number one.
Well, Mighty Jamie there, JJ, basically saying
vicious
that
the Vice-Chancellor there, Lindy.
He is quite vicious, basically saying that the VC has failed to take accountability for what he's been able to do at the institution. And one thing that I will say the Vice-Chancellor has been persistent with, I remember covering the Fees Must Fall back in 2015, and he's sitting on the floor of Senate House, surrounded by student Mcebo Dlamini, who had just been kicked out from his position by the Vice-Chancellor, addressing students and the VC who were there. And, one of the things he's been consistent with is the fact that his responsibility is to defend the institution, right? And what the students have been saying is, in defending the institution, when do you take, the account of the students into consideration? When do the students also become a priority for you as the Vice-Chancellor? And hearing him speak tonight about how, you have students that keep failing, and of course that's a huge issue, but, have they as an institution sat down and say, this is the type of trend that we're seeing. It's either the first, second or third years where we're seeing people having to repeat their grades. We know that there's an issue of students who still have to support their families. Are they failing because they're having to take up work and can't focus on their studies? What's the reason why students are actually failing? And I'll tell you what, JJ, there must be a reason why UCT, with its new Vice-Chancellor who's shown compassion to the students, is not facing the type of protest that Wits has been seeing. It's over to you.
The VC is here, and I want him to deal, and I know he can deal with any argument, but I want you to deal squarely with what that analyst was saying, so especially on, just be focused on the accommodation. There are many things.
So JJ, firstly, you get a candidate who's a student leader who was disciplined at Wits, and bring him here to pretend that he's a independent analyst. Firstly, those buildings that he talks about that were built before I even came.
The luxury accommodations you're talking about.
They're not luxury accommodation. They are accommodations, and they're very well done accommodations. But they were built before I even came. So this is when, you get dubious individuals coming out saying all kinds of things. I could tell you things about an individual that I can't because I'm bound by principles of confidentiality. But that person is a tainted individual, acting as an independent analyst. So that's the first thing that you want. The second thing is, it is inappropriate for your commentator to try and play up the Vice-Chancellor of UCT, who I think is a fantastic person, and project it as an alternative to Wits. It would be worthwhile noting that UCT has as many challenges as Wits, and they manage them, and she's been very adept at them. And it's inappropriate, and it's false to even assume that they haven't had this, because they have had as many problems as anybody else. If she just did her research, she would know that. Now let me address the issue of actually what we have done. So, firstly, Wits graduated 7,000 graduates in 2013 when I first came. In 2019, it graduated 9,500. That's about, effectively, a 30% increase in the number of graduates coming out. Part of that has to do with the numbers, with the increased numbers of students. Part of that has to do with the actual throughput that has happened, and improved throughput. For the last 5 years, we've had a first-year program where we identify individuals. We actually provide them with tutorial support. We provide them with other kinds of psychological and other support so that they can progress. Now, if your researcher had done her work, she would know that. But what she does is actually, instead of doing some research as journalists with integrity do, she looks at a Twitter account and then makes a judgment. So let's understand this. You want the numbers of Adam Habib? So 7,000 graduates in 2013, 9,500 in 2019.
On accommodation?
No, on accommodation we moved to 6,500. We brought in 2 new residences. But I will tell you this, most of our supply is private sector. So I've told you early on, we've got 14,000 demand, we've got 6,500 beds. We've arranged accredited accommodation which shows that we've got more than we need. The issue, as I said earlier on, is money. It's not, it's money.
But the number that the university can accommodate itself has
6,500.
It increased from...
It increased from about, when I, just before I came there, built this residence that they were talking, that's 1,000 more. So we are now at about 6,500, 6,700. We would have been at 5,500 at that point. Remember, that thing cost 300 million rand. There is money involved here. Somebody's got to find the money. Somebody's got to find the resources. But you wanted to speak about Adam Habib and his tenure. So let's talk about it. 7,000 to 9,500 graduates in 7 years.
So a clear improvement.
Right. Our postgraduates were 9,800. We now 15,100.
Graduates or just those who are registered?
Those who are registered for postgraduates. Our finances are completely stable. In a context where ESCOM and half of the institutions are in financial trouble. Our research was 1,200 research units. We're now just under 2,000. Our transformation moved in students from about 73, 74% to 82%. In professional and administrative staff to 90% black. And for academic staff, for the first time in our history, we went above 50%.
So I think, Jamie,
so here's the thing. If you want to judge me, if you think that to judge a person is to find out whether he's liked by the local commissar, or the local activist, or by Julius Malema, or by Blaine Nzimande, then I've done very badly. But if you measure me like how universities get measured, by its graduates, by its throughput, by its research, by its finances, by its transformation, we've done very well. The reason we're in a mess in ESCOM is because people go and think they're going to judge the success of the CEO, whether he's a handsome person, whether he knows how to toy, whether he learned Fanon. Then what you happen is you have load shedding.
Okay, Prof,
so
listen,
think about this.
I've heard you. I want to take a call after the break. Shana, who's standing by in Randburg. Jamie, you better come and speak for yourself, man. Because the Vice-Chancellor is guns blazing.
Let me be blunt. I don't want to be engaging Jamie or any other student on this. I said this very clearly. I'm here to put forward my views. I don't want to engage in a spectacle. Many of these student leaders like the spectacle. I have no interest. You want me to tell you how I think the issue can be resolved? Let me speak to you about
it. We're going to do that straight after the break. That's our last segment, solutions, Prof. 1 or 2 things that universities themselves must do, 1 or 2 things that government should do, the ministry, 1 or 2 things that students must do, and then we will throw that to the students a little later on when they join in on the round table with me at 10 o'clock. Let's take a break now. All right, we're rounding off our frank talk with Professor Habib. But before we do that, Shana in Randburg, good evening to you.
Good evening, JJ, and good evening, Prof.
Hi.
Hello, Shana, go for it.
Yes. I'm worried about the type of graduates that we are producing at all universities, FETs and all that. But now my worry is, I think getting myself into the position of students is that a lot of students goes to Wits, goes to UP, and come back with nothing if they did not graduate. So I was asking Prof if they have done research in terms of our NQF levels. Remember, if a person gets into a degree of NQF level 8, that person can be able to be given an NQF level 5 type of qualification if their money runs out at the first year or their money runs out at the second year. But the stress of living with nothing after...
Are you saying that, are you talking about conversion? Like if you register for something and then to be able to convert to something lower? Is that really what you are saying? Because if you register for BSc and then on second year you drop out, you can't graduate anything. Because a BSc is structured in such a way that it's spread over 4 years or 3 years these days.
Yes, remember our qualifications are divided into NQF levels up until 10. When a student gets in to do an NQF level 8 type of degree and then drop out at first year, then equating that number of subjects that are being passed into a particular level of
then they'll have no incentive to finish. But anyway, let me hear what the Prof has to say. Prof, has this come to your attention at all?
Yeah, what I think that there's two things. I think firstly what he's talking about is people who've dropped off, and as you said it's very difficult to give accreditation for a particular set of courses that you haven't finished the program. But I think he's got a point that says that we probably do need to restructure our programs in a manner that allows for greater internship, that allows for people to get experience, that is more in tune with the latest developments in the technology, in the open market. So I do think a greater intersection between the private sector, the public sector, and the university system to make programs more relevant. I, however, don't think that the answer, and I think both the private sector and the public sector need to recognize that universities only do one part of the learning process, which is to teach. Mentorship and other things still have to happen. You can't expect somebody to operate at 100% productivity at this point. And that's something that we need to learn about. So it's a learning process, and it's not going to happen all in the university. Mentorship and other things have to happen at the workplace itself, and it happened previously with us, and it needs to happen with this generation as well. But I do think we can learn better. But I wanted to come back to your issue of potential possibilities of how we resolve
how do we resolve this thing?
So if the issue is finance, we've got the issue of the missing middle. The question is we have to figure out how do we enable monies to be made available for them so that the missing middle can come and resolve those issues. But that's the first thing.
Can't you increase the cutoff so that it's no longer 300? Is something else, because 300 is how much per month? I mean,
the point is that we first have to generate the money, and in a context where we've got a 0.7% growth rate, we've got a real crisis. Now there's two models around this. Either government comes to the problem and says let's help you and create a loan scheme and finds another couple of billion to actually underwrite that scheme and bring the banks in, and yes, they will have a debt, but that's what we can afford, and then as growth rates improve, you can improve parts of that. Or you have to have the courage of unraveling what is likely what Jacob Zuma did, and then make that money available. I don't think that latter is going to work. I think the ANC is too divided. I think it will be used by the opposition in ways that will be used to undermine them, and I don't think that the ANC political elite has the appetite for that. But I will say this. Unless you resolve the question of financing the missing middle, which is always a government question. No system anywhere in the world is it financed and arranged, is done by the universities. It has to be a government decision. So that financing arrangement has to be done. And secondly, I want to be honest, there's two others. One, we have to have a rule that says you can't have repeated failures by students and they demand to be covered by public money. It's not fair firstly, they're blocking the space for others to come in. And secondly, it's irresponsible that we're not paying for passing students, but people are demanding that we pay for failing students. It's unacceptable. And actually, people say, you know, the student leaders have said, well, they came in, you allowed them to come in. Now you need to figure out the finances. But the student leaders don't say that they've been opposed to N+1. That they're demanding N+2 and frankly N+3 and a couple of other things, and that's problematic. We have to say, we'll give you a chance. We'll maybe even give you a second chance. But then it stops. And thirdly, I think all of us, vice-chancellors, government, and frankly student leaders need to come out and say, if anybody burns an infrastructure and institution, we will collectively out them. We will out them, we will imprison them, and we will hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
And that they haven't done yet, and that's the problem.
Yeah, well, the government's going to give them parole. Stephen, in PE, hello.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Go for it, Stephen.
Thanks for taking my call. I just want to say I'm 100% agreeing with the professor. What he's saying is making very much sense.
Yes.
And the students have to be responsible for if they fail to make a plan to pay the money themselves. If you go look at the students, they're out late at night, they're not in classes, and then when they fail, they want somebody else to take the responsibility that is theirs. And another question I wanted to ask, say the students burn the buildings down. Who does the insurance pay them out, or the university must pay it? How does that work? Nobody gets jailed or anything.
Absolutely,
when it happens.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Stephen's raising a very important issue. The Minister of Education actually has said that they are taking an attitude that says if you bend down infrastructure, they're not going to rebuild it.
Well, that's the first thing. Well, firstly, I don't think that that's sensible. I think you have to actually fight it, because then you said future generations must suffer. And because this generation has actually been irresponsible. I don't think that's fair. You have to say, better thing to do is arrest the people. And actually, if they're from your party, expel them. Let's see some action. Here's the thing.
And consequence.
95% of students in the universities are great young people. They're fantastic human beings. The sad thing is, there's about 5%, largely from political parties, who think they represent the 95, and half of the time are threatening them. Go and see how often political parties would walk into a class, threaten youngsters, and get them to stand up and come out. How is that fair? How is that legitimate? This is the problem. Look at how many people turn up for SRC elections. Less than 20% around the country.
I think it reflects how the country itself is treating politics.
Because I think most of the students, to be honest, are heartful of the leadership. They like the country is heartful of politicians, and they have such a low trust factor. I think students at universities are heartful of party activists who play party political games at the cost of the studies. You remember this in 2016. People don't like this. Before I even called in the police, I polled those students. None of them can prove that that poll wasn't independently verified. 80% of students, 78 to be precise, said, please let us complete the year even if you have to call police. These were largely black students. What does that say about that SRC leadership?
When they've not legitimate.
That's the point. If you truly represent your
but it seems to me that there is a gap of capacity building that maybe universities are not taking as seriously, Prof, because these are some of the institutions that are going to produce future MPs. They're going to produce the future Mama Bulos of this world. They're going to go to Parliament and misbehave.
So my only hope is that the people that become MPs are not from the parties, but come from the other 95%.
Well, that's because if they change the electoral system.
If they come from the other 95%, we have hope. If it comes from this 5%, we are seriously in trouble. because they play political games, and that's the challenge.
That Jamie was taking you on the fact that you
get Jamie.
You remarked,
I don't get involved.
You remarked about Nompendulo being an MP. What was that about?
Here's the thing. I have never mentioned Nompendulo or Fasia or anybody, but I have said this: if you let people create mayhem in university, and then appoint them
and promote
as MPs, what you've created is an incentive structure of creating mayhem because you then get jobs. That's the problem. Think about it and tell me if I'm lying. If these people are rewarded for creating mayhem in the system, then you create an incentive structure that undermines the basis for stability in our universities. Think about this. UKZN, I was a graduate student. I come from UKZN. It was, for all of its flaws, a brilliant institution. We've brought it to its knees. Look at what's happening at CPUT, at Zululand, where people are burning things. How is this legitimate? In which society in the world, when do you and I stand up and say, we want to hear the interest of the 95% of students? You see, you want to lead. It seems to me you lead in the interests of all.
But was there anything positive in the fees must fall, though?
I've always said I thought the fees must fall. Read the book. The book is quite clear. It says, I think the fees must fall movement was a legitimate movement. I think the cost of higher education had become too high because government subsidies had fallen and fees had gone too high. And I've said repeatedly, what I disagree with them is the tactics of burning, of attacking other students, of violating people's rights, of threatening people. Because you're toying with 300 people, doesn't mean if you come across some poor first-year student, you clap the person. Who do you think you are? So that's a bully.
So there's a culture of human rights. But quickly, because in the few seconds left, do you think, though, there can be an intervention by universities in as far as, first of all, increasing levels of consciousness? This is about consciousness among students. Two, capacity building. These students sit with you on council. And I don't have to ask you that sometimes they may come there even not having read the council pack.
Well, that's true. But what is also true,
because they don't have capacity to understand.
We have repeated programs of student leadership. We have multiple programs. Not Wits. All of our universities have multiple programs of student leadership. I will tell you that this is not about that. Ultimately, it's about creating a culture. You have to arrest the culture of anarchy that is developing across society and in the university. If somebody thinks there's no consequence for burning, they'll burn. If somebody thinks there's no consequence for breaking into a class and threatening people, they'll do it. That's the problem. And we've got to have the courage to make the hard choices.
I've heard you loud and clear. I'm going to put this to the students, leaders who are coming through, as a starting point. Because if we don't solve this, we are on a hiding to nothing. But thank you, Prof, for your passionate engagement as usual. I hope to engage with you before you leave at the end of the year. And once again, all the best with what you're going to do in the UK.
Thank you.
Right. Professor Adam Habib, passionate as ever on the issues of education and issues of how we should be taking forward the issues of higher education. Because clearly an issue that government must also think about it. The missing middle, it's almost a self-inflicted wound, because who determined that if you have 300,000, it means that you are the only one who can afford? If you have 600,000, but you have 4 kids at university, they will become a missing middle. It's a bit of a self-inflicted wound there. But of course, I want to hear what the student leaders have to say on our round table. So do stay tuned.